Thank you.
And thank you, Amrita, Vikram, Neha, for being here. The fact that this is a full house, and I'm very, very excited to see a young audience here. Thank you for coming and attending. Right? I do realize that uppermost in our minds today, mental health has become a big issue. Yeah, and we're all talking about getting anxious. We're talking about, okay, do we need therapy? Do we need a therapist, etc., etc.? We've got the best panel here to actually share their life experiences, their expertise. Neha, I'm starting with you straight off. You're holding a book called Homecoming. This is a book which actually captures the lives of 11 women who have been through journeys of within their families, paranoia, schizophrenia, OCD, suicide. Neha herself, it's a heart-wrenching story. It's the first story of Neha's own journey with her family and how she dealt with it, the impact it had on her. Neha, I'm not taking away from you. Would you like to tell us a little bit about Homecoming and how you managed to actually articulate and put it down? Because when this was happening, you were actually shrouded with shame. There was a sense of silence is darkness. It's been a big struggle to get out of that and be able to actually say, hey, I mean, you've actually co-founded the India Mental Health Alliance today. What a journey. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Puneeta. It's actually so heartening to be able to have these real, authentic, lifelong conversations in a public space like JLF. So I'm just absolutely delighted that we are here today. I think we owe a lot in, those of us in our 40s, 50s, 60s, owe a lot to the young people in the room because they're the ones who have really been able to openly have these conversations, challenging older generations. I don't think there's a single person in this room whose life has not been touched, if not shaped entirely by the course of their mental health journeys. Something or the other in our childhood, in our families, things that we may have experienced. It's in every home, and yet we talk about it so little. Sometimes I wondered whether we don't know how to talk about it. Sometimes we don't feel safe enough. Sometimes it's a judgment that we worry, and often there's a self-judgment, right? There's a self-stigma. And so this book really was sort of challenging ourselves and challenging society, challenging the way mental health is practiced, seen, understood, to say it's all about the stories of our lives. How can we really, truly own our whole selves, our narratives, including all the brokenness, with all the glamour and the awards, all parts of ourselves that really make us who we are. And so our lifelong journey of learning and healing is really what this book is about. It's 11 women. There's a school teacher, there's a mother who's an entrepreneur, there's a philanthropist who's a parent to a child with mental illness. There's me with 2 generations of mental illness in my family. Dr. Kavita Arora, who's a child psychiatrist, but was also a child carer to a parent with schizophrenia. And it's really how this tribe of women has come together. And we've all learned from each other's stories. And we hope that that becomes a bit of an excuse for everyone to say it's now safe to talk openly about these journeys. So really, it's bringing out these taboo topics like suicide and like other very stigmatized topics that we don't even know where to begin addressing. It's about mainstreaming and mainstaging those and saying, let's own it back. It's all of us and the stories of our lives. And can we now bring the doctors in the room and bring the experts in the room to partner with us on this journey? But really, it's about us and our life. So it's owning that whole story and making space for it.
Great, and it's a process. And in fact, I love what Kavita ends her story with. I mean, I like the fact that I look at myself not as a noun, but as a verb. That was lovely, Kavita. As a verb, which means that I'm a dynamic being. I'm constantly evolving. I'm constantly being shaped by my experiences and my responses to them. And that just gives you a lot of hope that I'm not stuck or stagnant in a certain space, right?
Yeah.
Great. Just a little bit about Amaha. So today, Neha has Amaha was founded as the largest private sector platform, which I think taps into over 200 plus therapists and Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, it really started with this intention. Someone like me meeting a bunch of doctors and saying, how do we make healthcare, mental healthcare, more accessible, more available? And let's do it in a way that works. Let's do it in a way that people can find it, relate to it in their local languages. And so Amaha today is Amaha and Children First, which is our child mental health organization. We reach over, in 16 languages, we reach over 600 cities. And the idea really is, can we get people, whether they need therapeutic support, psychiatric support, whether they need a hospital? We've just opened our first hospital. I can tell you, I've been in and out of more mental health hospitals with my mother and my brother than any one individual should, right from the 80s, 90s till now. And it is really sad to see the state of mental health care when it comes to the way severe mental illness is treated. And so can we actually humanize treatment? Can we make it sort of easier for people to partner on their care journey? Can we help people understand what is this going to look like, right? Yes, this is for life, but what does that mean, right? Can we give people hope and not just look at these doom and gloom conditions? My mother is watching over my daughter right now in Mumbai, enjoying her drink in the evening, as she gave me dahi chini before I arrived in Jaipur today.
As good luck.
Right? As good luck. So here is a parent with schizophrenia who has lost a son to mental illness and to adverse childhood traumas, and yet she is stable and wishing her granddaughter well. And so there are stories of hope and resilience, and that exists in all of us. So Amaha is really set out with that dream, and Children First, of course, is doing that for the youngest adults and little children, all of the neurodivergent conditions, ADHD, autism, but also looking at mental health challenges.
Thank you, Neha. And I think this is we're talking about accessibility, and I'd like to bring Dr. Vikram Patel in here. Dr. Vikram Patel, you're the, the Pershing Square Professor of Harvard Medical School, right? And you've actually been changing the global face of mental health care across the world. I love your approach, where the focus really is on tapping community-based resources to ensure that where there are no psychiatrists, you've got this frontline manual called Where There Is No Psychiatrist. But to be able to, I mean, we're moving away from this thing about we need just the expert, right? Towards lived experience expertise, right? Dr. Vikram Patel, I'd like you to share your journey when as a young doctor, you questioned the profession. You said, well, we seem to be only looking at diagnosis and disease, but what about curing or supporting incurable diseases? Would you like to just take us through that journey?
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, I also want to just echo what Neha said. It's just remarkable. It's hard to believe that we can have a session on a topic such as mental health at a literature festival. It's certainly my first experience of such a conversation. So I want to take off actually, from what Neha spoke about. Why is it something that's so fundamentally important to each of us? I consider mental health my greatest personal asset. It's not the color of my hair, even though it looks pretty nice, I think. It's not the skin that I live inside, but it's really the collection of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that make me who I am. And so you have to ask that fundamental question. It's the proverbial elephant in the room. It's something we all know is so central to our lives, and it's something we never talk about.
And yet it's invisible.
Yeah, completely invisible. Yes, like the proverbial elephant in the room. And I've spent, most of my career trying to understand why that is the case. And I've arrived at one clear message, and that is the very narrow medical model that really conflates mental health with diagnosed mental disorders. And then there's a whole set of different ideas that follow from that. There's something wrong with your genes, or there's something wrong with the chemicals in your brain. It actually has consequently led to the othering of people. It's led to the othering of people and contributed to stigma. Neha just spoke about the very sorry situation of mental hospitals in India. This is true of institutions around the world. Make no mistake, institutions for the mentally ill that was started about 100 years ago as a place of shelter actually became a place of incarceration, a place of coercion, and indeed a place of violence, where people with mental health problems were othered, they were removed from their communities, and indeed
strapped down, given injections,
horrible things,
electrical shocks.
I mean, at the very, at the most fundamental level, they lost their dignity. And I think if there's anything that is associated historically with loss of dignity, it gets stigmatized, it gets feared. And so my own understanding has been that the only way we can reduce the othering is to embrace a much broader understanding of what shapes our minds. And when we do that, we realize that what shapes our mind is not just the chemicals in our brain, but in fact the social worlds that we live in. And the most important aspect of that social world is the immediate neighborhood and communities that each of us inhabit. Of course, those communities have changed a lot. They're not just our neighbors immediately, but also the kind of groups of people we live amongst, and now in the digital world, also a much broader community. One of the things that, in the long arc of my work, I've worked for many decades in communities in India, but in the last 8 years, I've been working in the United States. And one of the things that's confirmed in me, living and working in the US now, why communities matter, and why just having a lot of psychiatrists doesn't, is consider this one fact. There are more psychiatrists and psychologists in the city of New York than in the whole continent of Africa.
Wow.
It's an incredible statistic, right? Yet, the mental health situation in New York is worse than any community in Africa.
And what do you ascribe that to?
Well, I subscribe that to the loss of community. The fact that in the United States today, we have one of the most polarized, the most splintered, I don't need to say it to this audience, communities. And I think it is a living proof that just simply viewing mental health through the prism of diagnoses, doctors, and drugs, medications I mean, is not the solution to promoting mental health in each of us.
Absolutely, thank you. And Dr. Patel, just a little bit about Sangat. You founded that in Goa in '96, and today it's across 3 cities. Again, it is community-based resources that you're tapping into. How is Sangat functioning?
Well, let me just give you a little bit of a backstory on Sangat. India is an incredible, I'd say it's the innovator in the world for having been able to embrace the idea of citizens' engagement in healthcare, and indeed in innovating on how you can leverage the inner power and resilience of all our communities in order to do things when the experts are not there. My own inspiration came not from the mental health field. My inspiration came from the incredible work of pioneers in India like Rani and Abhay Bang, who were working in one of the poorest districts of India, Gadchiroli, where they showed nearly 50 years ago that they could train lay women in the community, ordinary women who were not literate, on how to treat and diagnose newborn pneumonia. And why did they do that? They did that because no pediatrician would ever work in those villages. And so there was no solution other than empowering local communities. And of course, that has now become an iconic story in India's health system. Today, consider the ASHA, who is the largest Anganwadi worker is also, but the ASHA, who is the largest community-based workforce of any healthcare system in the world, is a direct consequence of that kind of ideology. It's what I did, I said, if Rani and Abhay could show that ordinary women in the community could save newborn lives, this is like a deadly condition, well then surely we can deploy the resources of ordinary people to support one another when it comes to supporting recovery journeys.
Amazing, thank you. And I think Amrita, so I've known Amrita as a journalist, a very, very sharp journalist, for 10, 12, 15 years, yeah. Amrita has actually set up, he's talking about deploying resources of ordinary people. So she's not ordinary. It's just that she's not a trained psychiatrist or psychologist. Yes. And yet she started a platform called the Health Collective, which is a safe space for conversations, for sharing on mental health. It's 10 years old, Amrita. I learned that today.
10 years this year, yes.
And it's amazing. It's online, okay? It's available. It's a space for conversations with an India lens. So there are stories from people like you and me. We share stories. Amrita sort of urges us not to share our names.
I'll clarify.
Okay, so that is a little safer for us. Okay, but there are stories from people like us. There are the experts. There are reporters. There's a wide spectrum of what you can actually access. And can you also, you can't connect with experts and get help,
We have listed from the beginning resources and helplines, which we keep vetting. We've had a very interesting 10-year journey, and I have friends and family. Abhishek's in the audience, one of my first supporters, and folks who have basically, as a sort of tribe, we call it now, been part of this conversation from the beginning. Because from the start, we wanted to initially make the most of my background as a journalist and someone who had access to credible information around mental health and mental illness. To share resources. So we started as a resource site, and very quickly, actually, people started sharing that they wanted to see, would there be space for, and is there any value in my sharing my story? And that's where the switch happened. I was like, we can actually do both of these things.
So it came from your readers?
It came from our readers.
Wonderful.
And when Dr. Patel is talking about communities of care, or we look at all of the incredible work being done in the grassroots, a lot of these communities, of course, have moved online. And we don't have enough time to talk about the pros and cons of this, but for some people, online space is safer than their immediate environment. And I'll explain why I told Puneeta that sometimes we do have to chat with people about saying, look, it's not a perfect world. I mean, I would love for each of us to be able to share our stories with our full names, as many identifying characteristics as we want. But for, younger people have come up to me and said, well, listen, will a prospective employer use this against me? There is still, whether we like it or not, and I don't want to be the Debbie Downer in the room, but there is still stigma. There is still so much work to be done to make it a safe space offline as well. So we have these conversations because we're not a hugely successful commercial venture, because this is not that project. We don't have pressure from advertisers. We don't have pressure from sponsors. So I can take time.
I love the fact there are no ads.
Yes, this was a conscious decision.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I think the only website I've seen.
We've decided not to monetize this as content, which at one point, if you all remember, maybe even 5 years ago, everything about content was how do you monetize it? How do you, make sure all those clicks and impressions are not going to waste? I fell for the same sort of trap initially, but one day you just wake up and realize, wait, every one of those represents a human being. Yes. We have to make sure this is a space where people can come when they want to feel seen. They can come and hear stories. Just 3 days ago, a young woman came up to me at a panel at Alliance Française to say that she has a condition and that she feels that she's not alone because she went through some of the stories. We then got a book deal commissioned as well, of course. So it's not entirely like me tilting at windmills. We are very smart about how we do these things. But I did want to, in a country like ours, even though we initially started with English, we have now Hindi content, Tamil content. We did comics very seriously for a while.
Yes, and that's on your website also.
Yes.
And you've got affirmations.
We've got affirmations. Actually, Patty introduced us to some incredible artists because we realized that, art speaks. People can communicate so much more powerfully through images. But my larger point being, the reason we didn't want a paywall is that by the way, looking at this incredible room, you will not believe that 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to fill, I think, the first 2 rows. So firstly, let me give you guys a round of applause. It's so heartening, I think, for all of us to look out and see you packing this room. But we realize people don't feel comfortable. And coming back to why I feel storytelling is the most important thing, is we each have stories. Dr. Patel was one of my first interviews. So I'm trying to be very smart and make sure that he's like, oh, wow, she's learned so much in the last 10 years as well. we all, one thing he did say to me is, listen, we all have mental health. We tend to conflate mental health and mental illness. But the fact is we all have mental health. We all have a way into this story. We need more, I think, safe spaces, people who can shepherd those communities. And I come back to the fact that we need to be having these conversations in our own languages, in our own drawing room. So it's amazing to do it here in a room like this, but who am I when I'm back home, when I'm with my friends? And so on.
Yes, yes. I'm just going to do a quick time check, guys. There's 15 minutes. Does this include the Q&A?
That's 2 question time.
Huh?
That's 2 question time.
So you can go for
Ahoy, Sanjoy.
you can go for 15 more minutes.
We have 15 minutes, right? Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so Dr. Patel, I'm coming to you. We've spoken about what we all have been doing individually, etc. Well-being, emotional well-being. We all have mental health issues, right? I want you to actually share with the audience to get a balance in our lives. I mean, there will be things that will happen to us that will maybe tilt the scales. At times, it could be a play of nerves. How do we know when actually I need to reach out for help, right? And if it's not, if I'm not at that extreme scale, how can I what are my coping mechanisms to be able to navigate my day with balance, with harmony? Things are not always going to go my way.
Yeah.
but how do I deal with it?
So before I answer your question, I wanted to just amplify, what Amrita said about storytelling. I completely agree with you. The way you destigmatize mental health is by telling stories of your own journeys. And this book is a terrific example of 11 sets of stories. And if I try to understand why that, why we have changed so much in the last decade, it's because all the young people in our world are beginning to feel comfortable to tell stories of their own mental health without the fear of being stigmatized or pathologized. And I think that leads to the response to your question, which is, how do I know when there is a problem, and what can I do in order to keep my well-being secure? And I'll draw not just on my work as a scientist, but also on my own personal day-to-day life here. The first thing to do is never pathologize a negative emotional experience and recognize that this is part of the full repertoire of what makes us human beings. Every single negative emotion has an evolutionary origin, and it has an adaptive function. It's telling us something. There's an internal signal that there is something that it is telling us about the world around us that we should attend to. And so listen to your inner feelings as an alert sign that something is amiss and that something needs to be identified and dealt with. It is only when you have tried to deal with it and that it has not led to a resolution, that it has persisted, that it has, despite all your efforts, and I'll turn to a moment what kind of efforts those might look like, it continues to affect your daily well-being. That's a good moment for your radar to say, maybe I need to seek some external help.
And not go to Dr. Google.
Well, you know what? I wanted to say, I actually do think the internet has been transformative. I do think that the internet does provide information that can be very helpful.
But can also get you to panic.
It does, exactly. I was going to turn to that. You've got to be able to filter that information. I often get asked, where can you go? Go to a trusted resource. Trusted resources tend to be professional groups, organizations that are actually representing collective voices, for example, people with a lived experience. Tend not to listen to the individual, like the current Secretary of Health in the United States, who will give you very ideologically loaded information, most of it which is unfortunately quite incorrect. But let me just turn to what you can do. I often think of 3 different sorts of techniques that I have evolved in my life. The first is techniques to calm my mind. And these are something that many of us in India practice all the time. For example, techniques of meditation and yoga. In modern psychology, we've used jargon like mindfulness, but really that's what it is. The second is techniques to combat negative behaviors. By this I mean, if I'm withdrawing from something because it's making me feel fearful or stressful, actually the right tactic is to engage with that something. Being activated to do things that reward you or address the problems around you. Withdrawal is rarely a long-term solution from the problem that you face. And the third is connecting with my social world, my family, my friends, people around me, those of us who are religious, through our faith. There are multiple ways we can connect with our social world. Try one or more of these, and I think you will find that 9 times out of 10, whatever it was that was troubling you feels much less troubling.
Much less trouble. Okay.
Quick add to
Thank
that.
you. Yes, I wanted to ask actually both of you all, how do you cope with stress and imbalances, and today, what's your coping mechanism?
Yeah, so back in the 80s and 90s when I was little, it was all about just running from your problems or fighting them or just freezing, right? A lot of the young people today have access to these conversations and resources we didn't have. And so as a young person, you might deal with your adverse childhood traumas by simply just running from it, and that's a survival mechanism, right? So fear is actually very helpful because we then tend to cope in whatever way we can. But as we grow, we have to recognize that we cannot outrun these problems and we cannot put them in the deep freezer in the basement and hope that they're going to go away, right? They're going to keep eating into our adult lives, and essentially within us we carry every version of ourselves, right? And we are a culmination of all our life experiences.
And
So if we just
it'll impact you physically.
physically also, right? So today if I sit with complex PTSD or an autoimmune condition, I recognize that this is my trauma in my body, right? In my cells. And so I have to be able to bring my mind into my body. I have to be able to recognize that what's happening in my body is also related to my mind. And I have to recognize every time I am either minimizing or altering or denying my truth, there is trouble, right? And so let's ask ourselves that in the course of our own lives. I bet every single person here has a caregiving experience, has a mental health experience, is 2 degrees removed from someone who's had suicidal ideations. We are all in the same boat. And so if we just recognize it at a population level, everybody is going through these things, suddenly it makes it safe to talk about it. Today, these 11 women can sit together and talk about it. We are all here. It normalizes the conversation. And I think the last thing I'd say is, it's all about connection, right? Vikram, you talked about connection with community, or the lack of. The rest of the story is connection with yourself, right? How seated and rooted are we feeling within our own selves, right? How many of us know who our true selves are? What are our internal battles? Where are we at with them? Or are we just trying to fit into the world and in some external context? And those fears, insecurities are really what cause it. So to catch them early and take them head on and say that if it was a choice between being the one that the world wants to see and being the person I want to be, then choose yourself, and that's half the battle won.
Great, thank you. And into what you said about connection, Neha, I want to just introduce the word trust. You know, I have found that I can only start trusting anyone else if I can trust myself. It all comes back to myself, to my inner world.
Yeah.
You know, and when I'm comfortable and I can trust, by trust I mean just accepting myself exactly the way I am. You know, and then from there moving on. Yeah, Amrita.
I feel like for some of the younger people, they're like, what are you talking about? There are other things we worry about. As someone pointed out in an audience, they were like, you all were born in the 1900s. You don't understand what we're dealing with. For me, despite everything I've learned from interviewing these amazing people over the years, I will still be on Instagram late at night when I'm stressed out. It will still make me more stressed out. You're in that like infinite loop of like scrolling. So I would say for me, one of the things is just put your phone away for a while. Anyone below the age of 30 is like, are you insane? You can do it. Put your phone away. Sometimes it does not make you feel better. Find something to do. So during the pandemic, I started realizing, and you know, again, interviewing people about anxiety really spiked. We co-authored this book with Kamna Chibber called The Age of Anxiety, and while I was doing interviews for the site as well, something someone said stayed with me for me to do personally. This is not if you have a diagnosis. This is if you're feeling anxious and you're stressed, basically, as all of us were during the pandemic. Find a way to do something for someone else. And the thing was as simple as, you know, call your grandmother. Call someone in. And I've taken this further to say, there are always people in our lives, you know, we're worried about, we don't know whether to reach out. If you can, and you have the, you know, the time, and you've put your phone away just to, or, you know, taken your Wi-Fi off, you can go over to people's houses, check on your friends. I've been hearing increasingly from younger people, which is again a plug for my new novel, The Other Sister. Social media has connected us, but we're so isolated still. We don't know what's going on with each other. Loneliness is now this other epidemic that we're dealing with. So if you can find a way to connect with other people, just building on what they're saying, human connections don't have to be online. And as many of my friends here and the OG Health Collective, Abhishek and B know, I also have a dog, which makes life easy and brings you back. I have a dog. So disconnect, go and find something that grounds you, maybe like, you know, go for a walk, etc., etc. But again, I think looking at you here, each of us, you know, we are each other's community. And I'm not even saying you don't have to come to that level of worrying so much, or as you were saying, pathologizing what you think you're going through. Sometimes just reach out to someone and say, I want to have a chat. And if we're each informed enough to say, listen, actually, maybe we could, you know, set up a counseling session for you. Maybe you should talk to someone. That's something each of us here today could play a role in someone else's life.
Right, right. That's great. I mean, the sad thing is that we had these support systems earlier, you know, when we had our joint families, you know, or you know, I mean, there were always the neighborhood where you knew your neighbors. Today we live in silos. We don't even know who's next door to us, right? Vikram, I just want to ask you in terms of, you know, the old value system we used to have, we don't talk about kindness anymore, kindness, compassion. Empathy now is a word being floated around like mindfulness, right? How important is that for, and I don't want to put it onto the parents thinking that they're going to be the perfect humans. They're also going through their own trauma. But how can we bring this back into society? you know, these values as part of what being human is all about. You know, I'm a human being. What does that mean? You know, I mean, I looked up, I mean, it was human being. Hue is a word for light. So a being of light. Now, what does that mean? You know, I'm just saying, how can we get this back and integrate it into our lives?
So I'm going to try and answer your question by just also referring to what Neha and Amrita spoke about. You know, I think we have to acknowledge that we are a social species. We're not an individual. And I think the whole emphasis in the medical model is treating us as if we're just essentially an autonomous agent. In fact, we're not. You know, we have evolved over millennia as an individual, as part of a network of other individuals around us. And I believe that 100 years from now, when history about this period is written, they will point to the arrival of the digital world as a fundamental inflection point in the way we organize our social relationships. There's no question that the internet and social media have helped a lot in connecting people, but they have also come at a cost. They've replaced, in many ways, the fundamental interpersonal human connections that Amrita spoke about. And I think that nowhere is this more evident than in the well-being of young people today. Yeah. We have the paradox that young people today are the most connected, have hundreds, if not thousands of friends, far more friends than I ever had in my lifetime, and yet describe themselves as being the loneliest generation in our modern times. And this is a paradox that can be only squared. You can square this circle only by saying what we have effectively done is replace the fundamental need for real connection with this artificial connection that we have on the digital world. So I do believe, answering your question, that detoxifying ourselves from the digital world, I'll give you one good example that a colleague of mine, actually a friend of mine, says, if you're coming to my house for dinner, you deposit your mobile phone at the entrance in a basket, because when you're dining with me, I don't want you to be answering somebody else on your WhatsApp or your social media. I want you to attend to this conversation that we're going to have over. I want you 100% here, and you cannot be 100% here. And just the final thing I want to say about forgiveness and gratitude. There's a very rich literature that one of the worst emotions we harbor is anger and envy, and I think, and guilt. The two emotions or actions that I found very powerful for myself is to forgive myself for the things that I know that I feel guilty about, but also forgive others for things that I believe they've done that have wronged me. And secondly, to show gratitude for even the smallest thing in life that has come your way.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And on this note, I'm actually going to open it up because I'm so grateful for all of this. Okay, there are many hands up. Wow. Okay, we'll start first with the with the young person here. And okay. Okay, let's have 2 or 3 questions from here. You can tell us who you want to answer, and then from this side. Yeah? Okay. Can you give him the mic? Yeah. Apna naam bataiye? Yeah, question. Don't comment, guys. We've just got 8 minutes left. I thought we had 10. Okay.
तो हिंदी में पूछ सकता हूँ मैं?
हाँ, बिल्कुल.
तो मैं क्या है गांव से आता हूँ, तो मुझे तो फिर भी कि मेंटल प्रॉब्लम क्या होती है वो थोड़ा समझ आने लगा है, लेकिन गांव में तो मेंटल प्रॉब्लम को प्रॉब्लम ही नहीं मानते. मतलब है ही नहीं, उनके सिलेबस में ही नहीं है वो सच कि भी सिर्फ बॉडी बीमार हो सकती है, मन तो ऐसा हो ही नहीं सकता,
मानसिक तौर से नहीं हो सकता.
हाँ, लेकिन क्या है कि गांव में वुमेन है वो काफ़ी अच्छा भी है, उनका बहुत अच्छा है, वो मेंटल काफ़ी स्टेबल रहती है, लेकिन स्पेशली जो मैन है वो बहुत अकेले हैं और बहुत स्ट्रेसफुल. तो उनके लिए कुछ है, क्योंकि वो ना तो यहाँ अटेंड कर सकते हैं, तो उनके लिए हम क्या कर सकते हैं गांव में?
Okay. Is there any help out there for men in rural areas who just kind of, yeah. Okay, we'll just get 2-3 questions and you all can answer then. Yeah.
So I have a question for Dr. Doctor, can medications cure mental illness such as BPD, or it's lifelong? And then, you know, we know that lithium in a way plays a part to cure. Like, is there a reason we know why lithium plays a part? So, these two.
Okay. Okay, one more this side, quickly, yeah.
So yes, the problem with this generation is that I guess we have been overusing the mental illness jargons a lot. Everything is anxiety and everything is a breakdown. And our only, say, mental doctor would be ChatGPT. So how do you think it affects us?
Okay. So who wants to talk about the, I think, rural areas? How can men deal with?
I think the one thing I would say, just to start off, being a woman who's written a book about 11 women, is that it's about talking. It's about being okay to talk about it. बात करना ज़रूरी है, और शायद it comes a bit more easily to some women.
क्योंकि किसी को पहले बोलना पड़ेगा ना.
तो आइडिया तो ये है कि everybody, मुझे ये लगता है कि everybody is waiting for somebody else to talk about it first. तो कोई शुरुआत करे and उसके बाद आगे बात बढ़े. This is the one thing I would say. Vikram.
ऐसा मेरे लिए पहली बार था कि ऐसी भी कोई होती है वो, और वो शायद वो मेरे साथ ही हुए होंगे ज़िंदगी में पहली बार. तो कैसे और को कैसे ला सकते हैं, और क्योंकि काफ़ी के साथ है ये प्रॉब्लम और बहुत बड़ी है शायद.
Begins from your childhood, right?
Let me answer the question that the gentleman asked me specifically. The idea of a cure is itself problematic. Because if we argue that our mental health is a deep, intrinsic part of our very being, how can you cure something? I would argue that yes, medications play a role, and lithium is very effective, especially when used for people who are living with a bipolar condition. But the idea that it's going to cure you is a false idea, because it does not cure you. What it does is it controls some of the more distressing aspects of a condition which can be devastating, but it will not cure you, because it's very much part of who you are. And a key goal in the recovery journey is to accept that each of us has a certain quality to our mental health, and that quality is affected, as you just rightly pointed out, through a multitude of experiences. Some of it is explained by genetics, some of it is explained, a lot of it is explained by our early life experiences, like the young man is referring to here, and a lot of it is also explained by what's happening contemporaneously, that what's happening to us at this point in time. So get away from the idea of cure, think more about recovery.
And I'll ask maybe the social media-ish question. I think that, it's really true what you say, and I hear this from people all the time, like everyone's talking about mental health right now. Everyone is not talking about mental health right now. We are all quite educated, privileged, and able to have this conversation. And Instagram is, I think, it's one of those things where I feel like be careful what you wish for. 10 years ago, we were like, nobody's talking about mental health in India. Now you're like you said, you're diagnosing yourself. I have BPD, my mother must be a narcissist. 10 ways to find out your boyfriend is whatever, So I think for us as consumers of that, sometimes it's fun to see, sometimes it's a bit disturbing. We have to be mindful of what we curate. So I feel like when you're having, for example, questions about mental health or something, just be mindful that a lot of the influencers are doing these reels and they're having fun with it. No one's going to police that. Don't get your diagnosis from Instagram or ChatGPT, which are a whole different conversation on what's happening with the ChatGPT. But you're absolutely right. I think the other thing about tech is it keeps feeding you what you're looking for. So in a way, when you start looking at mental health. When we started, and again, 10 years ago, I was like, wow, like there's so many therapy providers in India. I'm like, no, there were very highly targeted ads coming at us because we were looking at. So I think, again, if you're able to, and your generation is leading the way, if you're able to have these conversations offline, find credible sources. I will plug the Health Collective here, but find other sources like us where you can get the information you need, and it's not just a quick fix. So the other thing I was thinking, it's important to know is that it's great to be able to do that reel, but if I leave thinking, oh, that person has 5 tips for curing their anxiety and I'm not able to get better quickly, that's a problem too, right? So don't get all of your information from Insta, and definitely don't diagnose your parents with whatever the latest trending thing is.
Dr. Vikram, I just want you to answer, I mean, he's spoken about the rural area, but generally, men don't really talk so easily as women, yeah? How do we shift that?
So, I think that is because of gender roles. These are socialized. Men are socialized not to be emotional because emotionality is seen as irrational, and irrationality is the woman's domain. And
Boys don't cry.
Boys don't cry, and it's one of the fundamental problems for men. Young men, like this young man is talking about his personal experience emotional upheaval just as frequently as young women do. One of the less well-known facts is that men are more likely to die of suicide in almost every society in the world. One of the less known facts is that men are more likely to experience interpersonal violence, often from other men, by the way, not from women, of course, from other men. Not spoken about. But these are very powerful experiences that affect your mental health because men don't cry. And I think we have to address this by really directly subverting those gender norms that determine how women behave and how men behave.
Thank you. There was that young girl who was desperate. I think that's the last question. Sorry. They will be signing books. So yeah. Yeah, what is it that you really want to know? Okay, 1 minute, बैठ जाइए. Acha, okay, we'll take two questions.
My name is Prisha Mukherjee, and I was really excited about your session. So my question is to you that how to heal yourself and find your true self after all the struggles I've been through, like anxiety, trust issues, death of your closest family member, and how to just fit in, how to just not judge yourself and overthink about every little detail, how to just trust and engage with your friends and family. Thank you.
Wow, that's a mouthful. Okay, 1 minute, and aap bat pooch lijiye. Haan. Yes.
So, I'm having a question why does in every school there is a bully, and why does the bully always bully the one who is weaker and not the one who is stronger than him?
All right. We're over time. So what I'm going to actually tell you, both of y'all, is that you can take it offline. So Neha and Amrita are going to be signing their books. Dr. Vikram Patel, where can they meet you? And around here, please talk to him, because what happens here is that the next session starts in the next 10 minutes. तो अगर हम खुद नहीं जाएंगे, हमको यहाँ से बाहर निकाला जाएगा. Okay?
Thank you so much, though.